Tobago. It is a good morning, and I want to thank you for joining us for this live press briefing. I want to thank those of you who are joining us from across the world, across the diaspora, and who continue to be interested in the development of this great little island called Tobago. I'm joined here by elected and appointed members of the Tobago House of Assembly this morning. And this morning, we are going to share some very, very critical bits of information that we want you to be mindful of. This will also be the beginning of new methods through which we will communicate with you, the public, because we are aware that having been so successful at the recently held elections, that the responsibility for accountability and transparency will be higher than ever before. We want to ensure that we go above and beyond to communicate with you and through the varying platforms that we do have. And so the first thing I want to address is how are we planning to provide you with access to information, provide you with transparency, provide you with accountability. Next week, Thursday, at 1:30 p.m. in the afternoon, we will be returning to the House. The law says that we must have our first ordinary meeting within 15 days post the swearing in of members. And so we're going to have that first ordinary meeting next week, Thursday at 1:30 p.m. in the afternoon. At that sitting, we are going to spend some time amending the rules of the House to allow us to bring the public into what we do and have, perhaps for the first time in the country, what is known as direct democracy. We are going to amend the rules of the House, meaning the standing orders, to now allow for an assistant secretary or someone who is not a member of the executive to chair the Public Accounts Committee. Previously, Public Accounts Committee only chaired by a minority leader or someone appointed by the minority leader. In the absence of a minority leader, or any minority for that matter, we are going to set up the infrastructure to allow the Public Accounts Committee to meet. I have already signaled to the Chief Administrator so that through circular she can signal to all administrators, heads of departments, chairmen of boards, CEO of THA state companies, that they will be called to Public Accounts Committee meeting to sit and account publicly for activities and for the execution of Executive Council policies. Second to that, we will amend the rules of the House to now allow some of the House committees to be done in camera. Currently, none of the committee meetings of the Tobago House of Assembly are done in camera. And that's how it has been in the standing orders of the THA for as long as we have had these committees. So we are going to shift the policy dramatically to allow live broadcasts of some of these committee meetings, save and except in instances where the matter might be relative to issues like security that requires a certain level of confidentiality. That will allow you, the public, to listen carefully, to hear what's happening, and to form your own opinions and be able to submit those to us. We are also going to change the House rules to allow for questions that will be asked in the House to come from the public. So we are going to introduce e-governance. Well, it was introduced previously. The previous Standing Orders Committee did in fact amend the standing orders to allow, by way of petition, introduction of questions and so on to the House. But we are going to streamline that, have the systems up and running, so any ordinary person in the public can pose a question. Of course, the question will have to meet the rules of the House consistent with Westminster parliamentary politics, and the presiding officer, as is now the case, will have the ability in law to actually review the questions, ensure that they meet the requirement for the House. Of course, we will use a petition-based system, so you're not just asking the question, but we will want to have it on the website, see how many Tobagonians actually want that question answered, and we will set some limits so that there is a bar to be crossed, so that it doesn't become disruptive, and that people just find a way questions, including nonsensical questions, but it will be streamlined so that it's not injurious to democracy. Rather, it will facilitate the democratizing of our parliament here in Tobago. So the e-governance platform will allow for questions to come from the public. The e-governance platform will also allow for potential motions to come from the public that we will be forced to debate in the House once it receives support from other members of the public. And of course, when we get to the House next week, Thursday, we will give greater details on how that will work. We will also be introducing a civil society co-option, and the civil society co-option will allow us to have recognized members of civil society to sit as non-voting advisors on oversight committees. But of course, that comes from recognized civil society organizations. So like the Tobago Chamber of Commerce, we're not looking for those that just trying to form now that has no history and experience and credibility behind them. So recognized civil society groups, we will employ a civil society co-option where we will begin to invite members from these recognized civil society groups to actually sit as non-voting advisors to oversight committees. So these oversight committees too will do some of their work in the public space. That will allow you, the public, to also contribute, because we will want these oversight committees to bring into our parliament experts to sit and discuss some of the grand ideas we have and how they should be executed and so on. We will be increasing the frequency of sit-ins. Currently, Act 40 of 1996 just requires that there must be at least one sit-in per month. The standing order says that sit-in, or that ordinary sitting, must be on the fourth Thursday in every month. So we will remove that part of the standing order, and we will amend it to the extent that we will have more than one ordinary meeting per month. Of course, some months it might be one, some months it might be 5, some months it might be 3. So it's a fluid thing. If you look at us during the last tenure, we did in fact have some months where we had more than one sitting in the month. So that's not abnormal for a TPP-led government. The public calendar and Hansard records, we want those updated in real time. And I'm hoping that our public officers are listening. That means that we will need to get additional staff trained for Hansard records. What we have now is a significant lag in the Hansard records. It takes weeks, maybe some months, before getting the actual fearing, meaning where they write us and ask us to look over what we have said to ensure is consistent with what we in fact said. And so what we're doing and instructing on immediately is that we acquire the necessary technology, because there is technology for this thing, technology and staff, so the Hansard records can be updated in real time. parliaments all over the world do it. At the Red House, they have sufficient staff that one house could meet till 2 a.m. in the morning, and the next house can meet at 8 a.m. The same morning, and they have enough staff that the work can continue without any impediments. And we don't have that in the Tobago House of Assembly legislature. And so we need to have that remedied. We need to have that fixed. We are seeking to institutionalize referenda. We spoke about it on the campaign trail in terms of how we will treat with some of the big ticket areas under the autonomy question. There's no question that we want greater autonomy. That we are going to go for. And we promised that as we try to build out the structure and the tenets of our autonomy, that we will ask Tobagonians for their response on some of these areas. We want to go beyond that, the autonomy question, actually, and to institutionalize referenda on major island-wide decisions. Although at present, the law does not recognize referenda as a legitimate way of treating with these issues. We are going to have these non-binding referenda to gauge public opinion. And we will use online platforms to do it, which is the cheapest way, the cheapest method. Online voting platforms in the interim, which is much cheaper than a paper-based system as we used on Monday for voting. And now that we have gone through those, I wish to switch gears a bit. There are some lagging issues that we are setting in place, either a task force or some committees to treat with. The first one, OPR. The Office of the Chief Secretary is hiring Mr. Lalchan. Mr. Munila Lalchan is his full name. He piloted the OPR. This is the person who was our very first procurement regulator, the person who more or less was a forerunner for the system we have now. We are engaging him on a short-term basis, short-term employment basis, 3 months in the first instance, and he will lead a team that will create for us the regulations for all procurement under $1 million. The law says that if it's under $1 million, we are allowed to come up with the system, or if we don't do that, we will just have to revert to the general national OPR system. So we'll come up with a system for all of our tendering processes for under $1 million. And that will ensure that we could put some strong measures in there for locality and treat with that. Secondly, I have already instructed the chief administrator that we should get an appropriate external lawyer, and we are going to court for interpretation on the extent to which locality can feature in our tendering process. Some people in the public space are of the opinion that for all our contracts in Tobago, we can be exclusive and we can say only Tobago firms can bid, no other firm can bid. So I have instructed that we go to court for interpretation on the extent to which we can use locality as a feature in our tendering process. Once the court makes that determination, I want to tell you that that becomes essentially the law by way of practice, by way of the court's decree. That will settle the question for all of Tobago and all of our operations. The legal opinions we have been getting suggests that while we can have in the scoring, in the measurement of from these tenders as called for locality, it cannot be to the extent that it skews the outcome unfavorably to those who are not from this locality. That's the legal opinion of the THA employed attorneys. But I don't want to stop there because it's still being disputed. The questions are still being asked, and we are certainly going to ask the court to give an interpretation. And based on the court's interpretation, that's how we will have to run with this thing. Second to that, we are asking we'll be asking the new division that will come on stream soon of legal affairs and legal and intergovernmental affairs. That one of the things that they will have to do immediately is to provide island-wide training in our community centers on OPR, on what the process is, how you do a good tender, what makes for a good tender, what are the mandatory documents you must have for your tender to even be considered in the first place. What are the steps? What are the processes? Many people think that we are still in the days when you go up by that orange building there in Spring Garden and you go and you beg a man there with an afro to put down your name on the THA system and be listed, and then somehow that means you will get a contract. That no longer exists. I'll give you another measure that just cannot exist. In the past, the THA could have said, look, we will give you a mobilization of 50%. You're a small contractor, you do have the finances in the bank, we'll give you a 50% up front to allow you to fund the project so we could build your capacity. Now, based on OPR rules, if you cannot show or demonstrate that you have the financials for that project, there's no way you could be given that project. And I want to encourage Tobagonians to go and look and read the judgment on the case brought by CALCO against the central government, the former central government. I think the central government then gave a $15 million contract to a smaller firm. The big mighty CALCO went to court and said, how you give that firm? That firm does not have the experience like we did. There's no way that firm is supposed to beat us in this tender process. The government could not argue that, well, we just want to give a man a blind. We just want to bill a man. The government lost that case, right? So the government still had to pay CALCO and still did not get its project off the ground. So I want you to be mindful of all of these tenants when it comes to OPR. And that's why I said I'm happy this so-called Contractors Association is being formed. We will work with them so that they can work with the firms, the local firms, in ensuring compliance where the law is concerned. And we should be mindful that even if Tobago has legislative powers now, it won't be to the extent that the THA will be able to overturn laws made at the national parliament for all of Trinidad and Tobago. So be mindful of that. A task force is being set up to treat with energy and energy consumption within the Tobago House of Assembly. And we will be asking Ms. Melanie Trim to chair that task force. Their job will be to do an assessment of how we consume electricity and energy generally, and to provide us with some recommendations. Immediately, one of the things the Executive Council will be doing is, by way of policy, to restrict the purchase of vehicles using traditional fuel, diesel in particular. You know what is strange? One time we said we were clean, green, safe and serene. But how could we boast about a clean, green island and yet our modes of transportation are primarily using unclean sources of energy? And that shows you that sometimes we come up with these beautiful plans, because that was part of the CDP 2.0. Come up with these beautiful plans, but in actual execution, we fail miserably. Because we don't follow through with the concept. Imagine for a moment when we said Tobago was clean and green, that this was a space with the most solar panels per square mile or per capita, and the most EV charging stations and the cleanest vehicles working on the island for our tour buses and so on. We didn't even follow through on the policy. We didn't even go as far as to getting to our accommodation sector and helping them to transition into using energy much more efficiently. But for us in the THA, we have a problem. I can tell you that sometimes the electricity bill at Shaw Park Complex is as much as $10 million. That's 1 billion. You know what you could do with 10 million? That's 1 billion. And you know why it's 10 million? Because we have a building at Shaw Park that the air conditioning cannot be taken off, because once it's off, we end up with molding issues. It's a massive building, so it has to remain chill around the clock. The building does not have windows that can open up to allow for airflow, so it's right next to the sea, but you have no window to open up so sea breeze could blow in, right? That's how we constructed a building that cost Tobagonians almost $1 billion. And so this task force will look at policies and recommendations for how we save on energy costs, how we can move divisions away from buying traditional vehicles, especially if it's vehicles for other uses other than those that infrastructure or agriculture will typically use. I don't know that we could get 10-ton trucks that are electric. I don't think we're there yet with the technology. And I don't know if I want to trust the technology in that regard. So I'm not saying it's for everything, but certainly a lot of the vehicles we're using start to transition away from traditional modes of energy consumption. Simple things as the lights coming off. You drive around all our offices, lights on whole night, nobody is there, right? And that can save us on our electricity bill. So that's the first task force we are going to implement, and we are going to ask Ms. Melanie Trim to engage us and lead that task force on our behalf, and within a 3-month period, give us some recommendations for us to follow. Mrs. Petalan Roberts. We are asking Mrs. Petalan Roberts to chair another task force, and we are going to give that task force just 3 months to generate modern financial regulations for the Tobago House of Assembly. Act 40 of 1996 says that within 2 months of coming into force of this act, that financial regulations should be provided to the Parliament in Trinidad for it to be accepted. And if those financial regulations are not accepted, we are allowed to modify the current regulations, the regulations that were there prior to Act 40 of 1996, to the extent that is required for the functioning of the Tobago House of Assembly. And I'm paraphrasing there. So we are going to submit again. Mr. Hochoi Charles, first Chief Secretary, he submitted. Mr. London, our second Chief Secretary, he submitted. And the Parliament never really bothered. We are going to come up with those regulations and submit again. On the campaign trail, I told you that we are going to enact a policy where we move away from the issuing of checks, especially for large sums of monies. I can tell you, we had instances up to last year, 2025, where people went to the banks with checks resembling THA checks, with signatures resembling signatories from the THA. But you know what triggered the bank? The check number might have been wrong. And of course, once it's over a certain number, the bank will contact the THA to confirm the payment and the issuance. And that's how we caught fraud in those instances. But we have had one successful case where someone went to a company in Trinidad, paid for goods and services with a check that supposedly was a THA check. When the company went to cash the check, we said, no, we never issued that check. That check does not belong to the THA, but the person already issued out the goods. right? That's a matter that we reported to the police for investigation. That happened last year. And what was interesting in that particular instance is that that check that was issued reflected the next consecutive number that we had in our checkbook. And so when we say we take a policy that anything over $5,000, you have to get that payment via ACH in your bank account, it's because it will take away the risks associated with issuing checks. Why the threshold at 5,000? Because you could still go down at finance and you encash a check up to $5,000 there. And we recognize, especially when it comes to employing people and our new banking rules, when we are employing people for the very first time, chances are they don't have a bank account. A lot of our young people, especially those engaged in the 10 on 10 off program, came into the system without having a bank account. And this might be an appropriate time to call on the central bank and the Minister of Finance for us to re-engineer what is required for people to get a bank account in this country. Most of us here got bank accounts as minors. In my day, you go to the bank with $20 and your parents and a utility bill, and you get a bank account. Now, unless you can show a definite source of income, banks don't want to issue you with a bank account. So they're saying you have to be employed or have a steady stream of income before you can get a bank account. And because of that factor, we are saying the 5,000 level to which you can actually encash it at the Division of Finance, you can get a check. But anything above that threshold, we want to move away from paper-based payment systems where that is concerned. And the reason for the regulations is also so that we can begin to introduce digital accounting, digital systems. You see, a lot of what we do that is manual-based is not codified in any law. It's just practice. It's just tradition. That does not mean we have to keep doing it. And this administration will not keep for doctrine the laws of public servants and public officers. We'll keep the laws of the country, full stop. Tradition means nothing in that regard. If it's not a law, then we can change it. And we can change it for greater efficiency. We cannot continue governing the way we have always governed and expect different results and expect greater efficiency. Also of note is that within this first quarter, we will also launch the Strategic Development Pathway. And let me pause there for a bit. We took time within our first term in office to develop what is called the Strategic Development Pathway. Previously, Tobago had the Comprehensive Economic Development Plan 1.0 and 2.0. It's for short CEDP 1.2 and 2.0. The CEDP 2.0 expired somewhere in 2017. And we have not had as an island another strategic development plan or framework. The strategic development plan, or the strategic development pathway, as we call it, is a framework that will take the island to 2045. And how we want to develop this island. We have been talking to you about developing the greatest city island on the planet. And so we did, in fact, pull together a team that included economists and social planners and so on. We did internal consultations, meaning that we met with departments all around the THA. We met with workers, with administrators, and we talked you through. We brought in civil society. We looked at different elements. We came up with a strategic development pathway. We are going to launch it in this first quarter, and that will come with a website done so that you can see it, you can read it, you can create your checklist, you can look at what we are able to develop, and you can look at where we want to be able to head to the direction we can look at what Tobago will look like, feel like by 2045. The reason for launching it is so that you, the external client of the THA, you, the wider public, can now be part of the process. So we did the internal clients of the THA, that's our workers. Now we want to go beyond our workers to the external client, to you, the public, to be part and parcel of the strategic development pathway. And that your thoughts, your consideration will be noted and become part of the development model. The blueprint for Tobago that we launched on New Year's Day will now become government policy, and that blueprint was done in a way that it fits into the strategic development pathway. So we did not just come up with ideas. We didn't just pull things from a hat. We were very strategic in what we place in the blueprint for Tobago for what we want to see up until 2030, so that the next 4 years are essentially the beginning of our execution of the strategic development pathway. And we will want all departments, all divisions, all THA companies to take a read of it when it is launched on the website, and that you're part of the execution of it. I know that as a society, reading is a dying habit and art, but we have to get back to it. What we will also do with the strategic development pathway is that through the comms people here at the Office of the Chief Secretary, we will break it down into bite sizes, into small sizes, using graphics, using videos, so that it's not too onerous on you, not too difficult on you to read it. I know people are busy. I know people have 2 and 3 jobs. I know people have children. I know people have lives. And you're probably sitting there saying, why does Chief Secretary want me to sit down and read some academic document? So we will have it in varying forms to make it easier for you to know what we intend to do and where Tobago must go by 2045. That is critical, and we'll be following the strategic development pathway to a T. It's not by accident that today the Parliament is debating additional secretaries, because the strategic development pathway spoke to that fact and how we needed to realign some of the visions. A small team is looking at the internal structure of the THA as we speak, and by the time I talk to you next week, you will know what that will look like. There won't be massive shifts in terms of division realignment. So we're not trying to just go all new and break up every division and change every division name. That's not going to happen, but there will be some structural changes that are critical at this time. On the matter of our autonomy, which is priority number 1 for this government, the new Division of Legal and Intergovernmental Affairs, they will also be charged with coming up with a team of legal draftsmen, meaning lawyers whose skill it is to sit down and write law. So a proposed piece of legislation will be written. When that is written, it will then be sent to Tobagonians for your opinion on the matter, refined, and then sent to the Parliament, for the Parliament to then carry before the Chief Parliamentary Council, for us to ensure we get to the place where it's before the Parliament. Yesterday, after the swearing in, we did have a very short meeting with the Prime Minister and the cabinet members she had with her. And in that meeting, she expressed her desire to have this matter settled once and for all, her anxiety to have it settled. Yesterday, I spoke with the opposition leader at the chamber, and as I did when she was just installed as opposition leader, I reiterated my intention to meet with her. So you will see me meeting with the opposition leader as well, because I will want that when the bills are before the Parliament, it should be the one thing the entire Parliament agrees on. You see how the entire Parliament agreed on laws about fireworks? this is much more important than the fireworks law, right? And so we'll need the entire Parliament's agreement on it. I have never been averse to speaking with any opposition leader, and I'm certainly not averse to speaking to the government on the matter. But we need to move to the place where we have a proposed piece of legislation to go before the Parliament. And just to reiterate, the strategy is two-pronged. The strategy is, in the first instance, to have the constitutional change to allow us to pass laws, and to have within that framework a period set out in law for us in Tobago to sit and to actually come up with the structure of the Tobago House of Assembly. And as I've pointed out time and time again, if the structure is placed and done by the National Parliament, as the politics and the island evolves, then we'll have to go back to the Parliament to change it. That's why they're there today to give us permission for more secretaries, to change the quorum, the actual quorum in the House. If we had the authority, we would have done it ourselves. About the matter with the additional secretaries, in the proposed bill that the former government had, they were proposing to not put a number, to just allow the chief secretary to pick as needed, as he believed that's needed. And of course, the government is looking at both models. I, as chief secretary, really and truly have no intention of making every member secretary. That will not make sense. That will not be efficient at all. It's about how do we have a much more granular approach. And I started pointing it out yesterday. In this office of the chief secretary, we have resident about 3 or 4 ministries equivalent in Trinidad. In settlements, they have at least 2 ministries, with 3 ministries. 3. In health, have about 2 ministries. 3 actually, 3 different ministries. Education has about 3 different ministries. Food security must be about 4. Now, I understand that this is a smaller space, smaller population, smaller budget in most instances. But we do, in fact, have some divisions that are just too large to be efficient. And the granular approach will allow us to be much more efficient on deliveries. Because I'll tell you this, next week, at the end of next week, post the passage and ascension to the changes with secretaries, and I'm able to appoint additional secretaries. I will be giving every secretary I appoint just 9 months to start to prove themselves. If in 9 months they don't prove themselves, I'm just removing you and put somebody else. Because at the end of the day, when the delivery doesn't happen, everyone looks at the chief secretary, right? I am not secretary of all I survey, but I'm secretary of all secretaries that I appoint. And so if we don't have the delivery, or if you're unable to get the delivery done, then I'm sorry, I will just have to move to somebody else within the team. The team is large enough. The team is talented enough. We had a very robust, a very robust system for scrutinizing nominees in the party before this election of candidates. There is a reason why we went through a tedious process to arrive at candidates. And I know people were saying, when is the candidate? When? And we were there and interviewing and going back out and going to districts and so on. Is because we wanted the absolute best. I believe we have the absolute best. The island saw that we had the absolute best. The island voted for all of the best. And we won all of the seats. Therefore, the responsibility for delivery is greater. And we have to deliver, and the accountability must be such that where there are challenges on the delivery, that must be communicated clearly to the people of Tobago. And I'm not saying that everything we set out to do we will get done within the time frame we desire. Governance is a fluid thing. And I'll give an example. There were many things I had to shelve from this office of the Chief Secretary to facilitate an oil spill cleanup and to facilitate those payments. Many things I had to delay because an emergency happened and I had to delay it. So within reason, of course, one can look at why things might be delayed. I've already said on the platform that I have no patience with agencies, state agencies that are tardy in doing their work. And I'm saying clearly, if EMA tardy, if Town and Country tardy, I will move on with or without them, right? Let they carry me court, let they try to stop me. We will fight that then. But the delivery must happen. It must happen. It is not fair to the people of Tobago that we have a tender process, we awarded a contract for ECCE, and we're still waiting. We're still waiting on all kind of approvals. Yet, that ECCE has to be built in a zone where there is an absolute need for additional spaces. And it's coming at a time when the government policy is that we must have community nurseries so that parents have avenues for their young charges, responsible avenues for their young charges. We cannot be delayed on this. This is about getting the work done expeditiously and efficiently while saving as much costs as is possible. Right? So that's the approach. So you have heard it. We, within the next 3 months, we are looking to have the start of construction on the Corlan ECCE. We're looking to open the Melva Jofield Youth Hub. I'm sorry, this name won, by the way the people voted in Darrell Spring Wim. We should have some housing projects starting within this quarter, as in rollover from the last fiscal quarter and the last term in office. We are also looking at the start of Scarborough Secondary School and how we get that project started in this quarter as well. We also have on the list, thank you for reminding me, AREP, that the recreation ground in the Culloden area, where the THA purchased some 140 something acres of real estate, that the first activity there will be a recreation ground for the people in that Golden Lane area that have been clamoring for one for many years. That piece of land also comes with approvals already for resorts and villas and tourism development. So we are also looking at that and going out for RFPs, requests for proposals, to see how we can strategically bring the right investor into that space, which will in turn create employment for the communities in that area, employment outside of the Tobago House of Assembly. If we look back not so far in the past to 2024, a significant number of our criminal activities were happening in that area to the extent that we had to shut down the community center in Golden Lane and create a temporary police station and put police officers there to sleep there, and they're still there sleeping to keep that community in check. I am sure if you look not so far back, you will see where we had some fire bombings. I think a house burned down, car burned down, and so on. Young person lost his life and that kind of stuff. So we want to not just spend the money on heavy policing for communities like that, but to actually spend the money through community development, through sports, through social welfare, so we can engage communities and create much more cohesive communities. That's why we are also anxious to have opened the Melva Jofield Youth Hub, because at one point that WIM area was also a bit volatile and required our intervention. I've I've already signaled to the THA that I am not going to open that youth hub or any facility that is empty. And I'm saying it now. I don't want staging for an opening. When we open a facility, the same day, the community must be able to move in and use it. It can't be just the walls and it looking nice, but it has to be usable to the community. That's important. At this juncture, I will pause, and if there are any questions, I will take questions either from the journalists that are in-house or those that have joined us online. And the frequency with which we have these press briefings will increase significantly. More than that, we will continue to use our platforms. We have very well-placed social media platforms that we will use to disseminate information, and our programs such as 116, Let's Talk Tobago, and all of our magazine programs on radio and television will also be used to disseminate information. So no more than ever, I want to encourage the public to not just sit at home, but to listen, to pay attention, to read what we're posting, what we are sharing, because there will be an increase in what is shared. I know people can get information fatigue, and after a while you tune out because you see we're seeing the same faces over and over again. We're hearing a lot posting every minute. OCS page posting, so I'm tired of them, right? So we'll have to have that managed in a way. But please, we'll be providing the information. Pay attention to the information as provided.
Mr. Chief Secretary,
Yes.
I want you to look at certain things for me. Members of the public have been contacting me. If you can look into the Division of Tourism, there's a situation where a number of employees, new employees, have not been paid since last December. So I don't know if you can look into that. Some contract workers within the Tobago House of Assembly, they are also asking if their salaries would be increased. I know you are just in, you are not, we don't have secretaries and assistant secretaries just yet in terms of the various divisions, but they are asking how soon if their salaries would be increased. Also, specifically, I know you spoke about Tobago's autonomy. Could you just be specific, because I know autonomy is so wide-ranging. Could you narrow it down as to what exactly, in terms of Tobago's autonomy, will Tobago see?
All right. So I was not aware that we have employees at the Division of Tourism that were not paid since last December.
They contacted me up to this morning.
Sure. So it will certainly elicit an immediate investigation from me to ensure that that matter is remedied soonest, right? So apologies if that is the case, but I certainly was not aware that there were employees or are employees at the Division of Tourism. So I will look into this immediately for you. Second question, yes, contracted employees will see an increase. We will have to revisit the salary scale assigned to contracted employees. It is only fair. But I can only say after the executive is formed out in a larger way, because essentially an executive has started. Once a chief secretary and a deputy chief secretary is installed by law, an executive has started. But when we get all the secretaries on board, only after that period, I will be able to see the extent to which that increase will happen. But I can, in fact, confirm that there will be an increase. As a matter of fact, during the campaign, I spoke with the then Secretary of Finance, Secretary Roberts, and I did ask that question one particular event. She said, of course, Chief Secretary, it's just standard on what we have to do. So I have already been so advised. When I speak to the issue of our autonomy, I'm talking about changes in the legislative framework that governs Tobago and how we govern ourselves. I'm talking specifically about Tobago finally having that right to self-determination. Tobagonians being able to say, this is my government, this is how I want my government to be formed, and this is how I want my government to work. This is how I want my government to look like and how they should operate. For that to happen, it means that the National Parliament at this time must accord unto the people of Tobago the right to have a government that can actually pass laws on its own. On the campaign and in the blueprint, we said we want to have that right by the end of 2026. Subsequent to having that right, we said we need at least another year to consult with Tobagonians to look at the structure. What do I mean by structure? Structure means simple questions. Are we going to have two houses in the Parliament of Tobago, or are we going to continue to have one house? Are we going to have ultimately separation of powers, meaning that the executive is separate from the legislature, or are we going to have an incorporation of those powers with the legislature and the executive operating in one space? How many seats we should have, how many councillors we should have, what are the rules governing the operations of a presiding officer, how many divisions we should have, administrators. All of those things are structural. And we feel as though, and we feel strongly, that we should not put those structures in the national parliament, because it means, or in the constitution even, because it means that every time we have to make a change, we'll have to go back to Trinidad to make the change. It's important to understand that politics, governance evolves. We are not the same way that we were in 1962. Imagine if we were still operating under the same constitution as 1962. No changes whatsoever. Then we would be a backward country. And it's expected that as the island goes, let's say in the future Tobago moves to 100,000 people. That might mean an increase in the number of seats. But if that structure is not done by Tobagonians in the Tobago Parliament, then it means that every time we need to change the structure, we have to go back to Trinidad and beg somebody to make that change. So that's why in the blueprint, we had a two-pronged approach. Approach one is to get reasonable legislative change by the end of 2026. Option number two would be for us to sit as an island and work out the arrangements that we will want to see for the structure. And I've already said via the blueprint that the use of the referenda system is one of the methods we will use to get public participation and buying in terms of what we ought to do. So the days when one bright man, because you have a PhD, will determine for all our way what the thing will look like will come to an end. Every Tobagonian will have a chance, because Tobagonians are bright people, smart enough to decide for themselves what they want and how they want it to look like. That's democracy. So we will not have a system where it's dominated by a few and a few voices who speak louder than everyone else, who might very well be more educated than all the rest of us. But certainly in a democracy, the majority must have its way, not just its say. Any other question?
I just want to say good morning, I believe, to the Honorable Chief Sec.
Thank you.
And to all the, delegates. Let me use that word, delegates. My question, I think you already answered. Yeah, it was pertaining to the autonomy. And we know that the autonomy is really a vast word, and a lot of the public don't understand, right? So is it possible that you could really brief us, if we are granted the autonomy, give us a slight detail of what are the changes that will be implemented?
That'll be difficult at this time, because we're not there yet. We had bills come before the Parliament that were all rejected. The last being the one carried in 2021 that was ultimately rejected in 2024, late 2024. So that's why we're going to employ the use of legal draftsmen. There's even a suggestion that we should ask of the National Parliament to have representation from the Chief Parliamentary Council to be part of the team one time. We have something drafted as a proposal. Then we'll send that out to Tobagonians first to look at it, say what you think, and then after having that consultation, then we carry it to the Parliament. Of course, we're not looking to consult on it for 4 years. We have been at this for as long as. And I think there's a section of the population that's becoming wary of it, like get it done and over with. But we also must ensure it's done properly. Because we saw in the recent campaign how people wanted a firmer stance from me about a radar in Tobago. While at the same time, those same people carried a piece of legislation that removed a request from Tobagonians for there to be concurrence on matters of national security and international relations as it pertains to Tobago. And that's why it's so important to have it done well. Because if it's not done well, we will end up in a problem where we do in fact have greater powers, but we are still stymied in our development and our growth. I am seeing a hand online from Tobago Updates.
Yes, good morning, Chief Secretary.
Yes, good morning.
And good morning to all the elected officials. Congratulations. A quick question. With the expansion of the secretaries now from 9 to I think it is 11, how will the THA be financing that expansion given that the budgetary allocation has already been confirmed? That's one. And two, you mentioned a clean, green, serene Tobago, and that is in full alignment with the Paris Agreement, which Trinidad and Tobago is a signatory of, which is talking about reducing our carbon emissions by 2030. Will the THA, seeing that we're looking at autonomy, be looking to define Tobago's marine borders, and as a subsequence to that, looking to see what oil reserves now lay in Tobago waters, and perhaps how that can augment our Tobago economy and revenues?
Thank you for your brilliant questions, Ms. Green. If I didn't know better, I would think that you were TPP, based on the philosophical underpinnings of your questioning. Maybe you are. I don't know. But let me answer your first question, the financing the expansion. The law is clear. All funds allocated to the Tobago House of Assembly are sent to the fund account of the THA. When the funds are sent to the fund account of the THA, the Tobago House of Assembly then decides what it does with the funds, notwithstanding the budget. In other words, we have full authority, and you could perhaps use autonomy here, that once funds are sent to the THA decides how it's used. And we do that every single year. Every single year. In fact, that's how CPEP and URP is paid every year. Because every single year that we have had CPEP and URP, we have never had sufficient allocation from the central government. And every single year, what we do is take monies, reprioritize it, and ensure the payments are made. Similarly, with the shifts in the systemic shifts, all that's going to happen is that we are going to take what is already allocated to us and we are going to proportion it accordingly. I also want to hasten to say that the shifts that are happening are actually in alignment with the current priorities of the Tobago House of Assembly. I spoke about the strategic development pathway. That pathway spoke about there being a division specific to planning and development. That pathway spoke about there being a division specific to legal and intergovernmental affairs. So it's not new things. Those are things that were already in the strategic development pathway. The budget that was read by and approved by Mrs. Petalan Roberts last fiscal included such bill out. So we are in a good place because this is exactly what we asked for the budget for, essentially. Your question about the Paris Agreement and maritime borders, and I'll answer it in two ways. Number one, I'm a firm believer in the Paris Accord and the goals that we have to arrive at by 2030. I think Trinidad and Tobago is woefully behind on meeting those goals. But I think Tobago has an opportunity that we are not capitalizing on. We have more sun than we know what to do with it. But we're not even harnessing that. We have not even begun to explore potentials with wind and other green forms of energy. We did have a bill out, and I spoke about it on the campaign trail. We had designs done. We had locations identified to have about 25 EV charging stations around the entire island, public charging stations. And that's where we sent our team of engineers out. They looked at where THA owns property and already have the electrical capacity to carry the load to install these public charging stations around the island. But we just did not have the money at the time to execute. In fact, what happened is that as we were preparing for the build out, the oil spill happened. And that's one of the projects that my office was advancing, but oil spill happened. And because of the oil spill that happened, I had to decide the EV charging stations could no longer be a priority for the government. The oil spill is now a priority. And so we look at this fiscal year, look at the work outputs from the Department of Environment to see how we could get that done. But meeting the Paris Accord by 2030 requires partnerships between the public and the private space. It's not enough for what we want to do in the government sector. We are doing it because we want to lead by example. We are doing it because I want Mrs. Petalan Roberts to have to release less money to pay public utilities, particularly electricity. Because I could tell you, I don't know if Tiantec does this in Trinidad, but Tiantec does send us disconnection notices too. Right? So when Shaw Park bill gets to 10 million and it's not being paid, they send disconnection notices. We have to rush to pay some and enter into agreement to pay off the rest. That cannot be the most efficient way. And there's no reason why 1 billion should have a bill that mounts up to $10 million. That is too high. That's 10 million. You know how much people could employ with that? You know how much work we could do with that money? And so it's also a cost-saving mechanism for the Tobago House of Assembly. And I'm not just saying these things idly. I'm saying these things because I want public officers to know these are firm instructions. There is no Farley 2.0, but I want to be clear. I want to be clear. In instances, and I said it on the night of the victory, I have seen instances where they are clear, where they are simple, where they are lawful instructions that are just left to languish, not executed. And I have no more patience for that. Let me be clear. I have no more patience for that. Where it is lawful, where it is clear, and where it is a definitive instruction, it has to be carried out. Because at the end of the day, no one has to account to the public for the lack of delivery but us. And it is not fair that we have to account for things and then we go through all the planning process. We're ready to execute. Monies are even released to divisions for execution and then nothing happens. The executive is actually not by law an executing agency. We are a policy-making element of the governance, of the government. The executing arm of the government relies on our large body of public officers. So we are depending on you. We are working with you. There's a reason why we have all of these lovely end of year activities and we try to motivate you and so on. It's because we love you and we want to work with you and we want you to work with us. But we want you to appreciate that it's not just the people you vote for that have a responsibility to the people. You do too. And that when you don't execute, then somebody suffers. And I'll give an example. We created a policy to help our students in Jamaica post Hurricane Melissa. Executive Council note done, request release done, money is released, and I'm being called in Christmas to say, well, we ain't getting money yet. Document on somebody's desk because they had a question for so long. And I'm saying, but the poor children there needed the money and they couldn't get it. And the question didn't even require us to go back to exec. The question was answered and the money started being released within 24 hours thereafter. So what was happening for all the weeks before? That cannot be how we operate. It can't be how we operate. And in this season, as I said, there's no Farley 2.0, but for everything, there's a season. And in this season, I'll be very much prepared to call public officers out by name. And say the document on so by so desk, they had it for X amount of time and they did nothing. I'm prepared to do that because my patience run out. More than that, we have billing out now of the website. We already have it at tourism, where we will have a team monitoring all of our critical projects and where they are along the project pipeline, which officers are working on them, what's delayed, etc., etc. That way we will get efficiency in the delivery. We have to get to that place. And let me tell you, it's not to make Farley look good, eh? It's not to make Farley look good. Farley will look good regardless. Regardless, I will take a bath, I will smell nice, and I will dress nicely, and I'll take a haircut. I will look good regardless. So it's not to make Farley look good. Don't think you're doing Farley a favor. It's not Farley at all. It's about the people of Tobago that requires the service, that requires the response. It hurts. It hurts when somebody roof blow off and all they need is 2 galvanized. But procurement can't procure 2 galvanized for 3-4 months. And we're trying to pay a rent for that person. And then the rent is now delayed or late because procurement says if you have to pay rent and we have to rent the place for the person, then there's a whole another procurement process that is triggered. It is not fair to the people of Tobago. And what I realize every single day, and it was even more apparent earlier this week when I attended a funeral, I think that was sometime on Wednesday morning, that we are so connected. I went to a funeral across at, at Bethany. And when I think I'm going to the funeral because I know this one relative, I didn't realize I know the daughter who was my first supervisor when I started working in the THA all the way back in 2009. And then I realized the granddaughter was junior to me in high school. Then I realized another granddaughter had an issue trying to get into the medical practice through TRHA, and I helped. Then I realized I know this cousin and that cousin, and I didn't realize all them people related to this one woman. Why am I telling you that? Because the truth is, we're so connected that when these things happen, we are actually hurting our own relatives, our own families. It's not anybody else. And yes, I don't really care at this point who you voted for. I don't care. The election gone. You're going to get a time 4 years from now to vote for me or somebody else. But I don't care who you voted for. Between now and the next election, our job is to execute. Between now and the next election, Tobago is we. And that includes you too, even if you didn't vote for me. And it's about how you deliver on those things. I also want to be clear that where we have contracted officers who are not doing their jobs, I am going to say to secretaries, do not approve any renewal of contract. And if you want, carry to court. We have a whole division now to deal with legal issues. So carry to court, right? I prefer to pay you in court than apologize to Tobagonians for non-execution, right? And if you're here and you're not executing, then you have to go your way. It's simple as that. We have to ensure that we're delivering to the people of Tobago. So the same way I will hold my members to account, and they have to account, the same way I say in the first instance, we will have a 9-month review to see their performance. We're also saying we have to ensure that all of our employees work and execute. And let me be clear, we have some excellent workers. We have some that go above and beyond. You look at the workers in TEMA, never a day of being unproductive. When we have natural disaster, I will go there with them. Long hours, I don't even know how they survive it. Look at the work they did during the oil spill cleanup. One worker ended up with a stroke by the time we were done, right? And now had to be on lighter duties, because we were just working and going on. So we have workers that work and put out the work. And that's why we have the awards and all of the reward mechanisms to honor those people. But I'm saying all of us have to get into the lane of being productive. I ain't want to war with nobody. Me ain't fighting nobody. I ain't fighting up with nobody either. I'm simply saying we have lawful, simple, clear instructions and policies. Let me just execute them. And where you have a challenge, there's a caveat. Where you have a challenge, you still have all the authority and legal wherewithal to minute it, to write it in the file. So you don't have to agree, If you have an objection, write it in the file. But don't just put it down on the desk and put it aside because you don't agree. Write it in the file, let it come back through the administrator and the secretary, and let clarification be given or further instructions be given. But the answer is not to just put it down. We have to help people. We have to help Tobagonians. There are people here who need the help. And it's your family, it's my family, it's all of we family. Tobago is we, right? That is in the Tobago national mantra. Tobago is we. And because Tobago is we have to get on board and try to get the activity of work going. Because at the end of the day, Tobagonians that suffer when we don't get it. And finally, our maritime borders. That's the reason why I rejected the last and proposed bill. Because you can't tell me that I am sitting here in a consultation with an oil company that's drilling, testing wells 14 to 15 miles from my shore, closer to me than Trinidad. And I don't have a say, not a token approach, not just a say, but I have a real say in what happens in my maritime space. I must not have to ask anybody in Trinidad for permission to build a jetty. I must not have to ask anybody in Trinidad permission to pass laws to govern our marine parks and what happens down in the Buku Reef and Nylon Pool area and up at Speyside and going around the northeast. I must not have to ask anybody permission if we want to go to the North Atlantic and have windmills there. In other words, Tobagonians must have authority, not just by definition, but by legal coverage and legitimate action over our maritime space as well. Yes, in fact, we have been making meetings available to investors. One of the things that will be set up, that we started setting up last THA and didn't quite complete, was the investment commission. So we have investments proposals coming in from all over the world. We have a team of 2 people employed within the Office of the Chief Secretary right now that do a sort of vetting and engaging and encouraging them to send the proposals. What we are going to have in place by the time we get to February is an installed investment commission whose task it will be to review and give the executive a recommendation. because I don't want to be accused of Farley by himself sitting down and saying yes to an investment proposal. I will want the benefit of experts who will look at it, look at impact for Tobago, look at costs, look at how we can benefit from it, and before I say yes or no, and before I even carry to the executive to make a final determination. So the answer is yes. I have in fact met with very many number of such investors coming for meetings, and let me hasten to say that that I or a member of this team meet with a potential investor does not mean something wrong is happening. It means that something trying to happen in the dead of night. It is what investors do. People with real money to spend, they're not coming to sit down on a block to ask for an investment opportunity. They are coming and knocking on the doors of the chief secretary. Somebody who wants to come here and spend 100 million US, 500 million US, not coming and sit down on a block to talk to anybody. They will want to talk to the head of government to see whether there is a receptive government. So I want to be clear. Meeting with these people does not mean anything corrupt is happening. And that's why an investment commission will be installed soonest that will review these proposals. The meetings we have essentially will be just formality and to introduce them to our system and the expectations and to look at what government policies, to review what the blueprint is, ensure that whatever they are pitching is in alignment with Tobago's goals and visions and the strategic development pathway. But ultimately, an investment commission will make a recommendation and then the executive council will decide yes or no. But we do need investments. We do need critically foreign direct investments. We need people with capital to come and use the capital in Tobago. Look around the region, and I hear it all the time from people. The same Tobagonian who will say, I don't want these people in my space, in my place, right? They travel all over the region, and then they come back and say, you know, when I went to Barbados, I see this. When I went to St. Vincent, I see this. When I went to St. Martin, I see that. Look how much cruise ships it have in the port. But they know St. Kitts Nevis just signed up with Disney to do over the port in the major cruise port. It's not St. Kitts Nevis people money and government doing that because they understand those things are costly and the government can't afford it. So you have to engage private people with private money to make the investment here. At the end of the day, these private people, they can't, you feel Disney could pack up the port in a suitcase and or pack it up on the cruise ship and go back to Orlando, Florida with it? They can't. You feel a hotel could pack up the land in a suitcase, put it in a grip and carry it on B and fly out to London? He can't. It stays right here. And the good thing is that if the investment fails, it's not Tobago people money that fail. It's their money that fail. And just move on to the next and the next. But we have to engage private investors to invest in this space. A lot of what is required may not be required by the government per se. Think about it for a minute. We have more community centers than we know what to do with them. We have so much playing field, so much lighted, so much grounds that are lit that they just lights on whole night, right? Nobody there but lights on. We have swimming pools. We have beach sport arena. We have more health centers per capita than anywhere else. If you look at the 45 years of the THA, it was spent building out public infrastructure after public infrastructure. What is really needed now is private investment for some of those innovative things that are required. I will also go on record as saying that some things that ordinarily will ask the government to do, the government does not need to do it. Private people can do it. For example, we need a built car park in Scarborough. Why must the THA build that? Why can't a private person build that? The research we have, the study we have, and that was done by UDCOT that sent to us. UDCOT said if they build it, they will make back the money they spend and pay off their loan in 2 years. 2 years. So you telling me a Tobagonian with the capital, maybe someone in diaspora, should be given the opportunity to build that, to earn from it, to maintain it, to get some retail, to get their own staff. The government shouldn't have to do that. That's an opportunity, a business opportunity for an investor. It is why, as we came to a close of the last term, we put out for tender the lands at Petitchou, that is down at Lambeau, for Flagstaff above Charlottesville, the Mount Dillon Hill above Castara, the Lookout Point above Speyside, I think 1 or 2 of the forts, and we put out for requests for proposals. Scarborough Fish Facility, request for proposals. You know why? Because we want you, the public, to come and say, you know what? I going up Mount Dillon Hill, and I could put a nice little restaurant there. I will earn, and that when visitors come to the area, they have access to some facilities. We have the THA building beach houses all over the place, and then charging about $700 in rent for the beach house. They poorly maintained, sea blast mashing them up. When really and truly what we should have done is say to the public, look, this space here, nice, go and build a beach facility, run it, run a bar, run a restaurant, have some entertainment there. All over the Caribbean, that's how it's done. You travel the Caribbean, government ain't going and build no beach facility in the Caribbean. It's private people building it and earning from it. And that's how we reduce the employment on the THA, because more and more of you have an opportunity to earn from your island. And that's why we have been going out to tender with these things. I'm advised that it's at the evaluation stage, those tenders, but we have to go out and allow the public to participate. Do you have another question, Ms. Green? Ms. Williams have another question?
Just to bring some highlights to you, we also have been contacted in terms of ward maids at the hospital. I know you are surrounded by the ladies. I don't know if you will be bringing back Dr. Faith Brebner as health secretary.
That's left to be seen, I don't know.
But some wards, there is a question in terms of at the hospital, staff is asking, you know, how soon additional wards maids can be hired. They are tired. They are saying that they are overworked. In addition, there's a situation with long-standing increments of teachers. We have been contacted by some teachers, and they are asking how soon will they be paid their long-standing increments.
All right, so the matter of ward maids, I will have the TRHA look at that. I don't know what's the HR position right now, where the staffing is concerned, what the establishment looks like, if they did an audit that will recommend additional ward maids and so on. But it's something that we could definitely look at, especially if there is a shortage of staff there. With regards to increments, we have been paying increments and gratuities. It's continuous. In fact, the way it works is this year we say, okay, we have a $10 million budget to clean it up. We pay that $10 million, and by the time we pay it, we have an next $10 million to pay, because it's just a continuous flow. We have prioritized in this fiscal payments of gratuities and increments. I think up until the election, we had paid about 20, no, across the entire space. You remember that figure?
Oh, you mean in
Yeah,
the entire...
yeah.
It's more than that. It's close to $100 million in gratuities. Every year was
Yeah.
135.
So we paid about 100 million or so, over 100 million in gratuities and increments. So it's a huge budget every year, right? But we are on a mission to bring those up to date and clear it up. It is actually a priority and something to which the Division of Finance has been making releases to varying divisions. That also means and includes those who are doing, who have overtime payments at divisions, those daily rated workers that we owe overtime. You too are included in that priority. Ms. Green?
Yes, good morning again. So in terms of the amendments that have been made to the export of construction materials, is the export license that's been presented to THA by the Prime Minister on her last visit, not this visit, the visit before. Is that license to Spell still applicable? And if it is, has Spell been able to utilize that license since we've received it?
I believe the license is still applicable. I have not been advised otherwise on that. And Spell is using it to the extent that there is a buyer, I am advised. There is an approved buyer in Guyana, and they're making preparations to do their first shipment out as we speak. So that is an active situation. I want to thank you all very much. Or just one more thing that I forgot to mention, which is and I'll segue into closing on this. The Tobago House of Assembly is a body corporate. That's what the law says. A body corporate means that we operate as a company with a personality. It means that we can be sued and we can sue. It means that we can take legal actions as an individual or as a corporation. It means that anything levied against us is not levied against the central government. That's what being a body corporate by the law means. That means that from time to time, the THA will have legal issues to be addressed. We have had instances over the last term where legal claims are made against the THA and nobody see them. In fact, as we're approaching the end of the year, I saw a pre-action protocol letter because somebody somewhere didn't respond to a FOIA. I didn't even know the FOIA request was made. And when I'm asking, nobody could allocate where the original request was, right? But it had reached a stage where a pre-action protocol letter came to the THA about the matter. Going forward, once that division is started, we will ask that all legal claims be sent there, regardless of which division, department, THA company, that it be sent to that singular source. In the central government, any claim that is made against the state is sent to the office of the Attorney General. And then the Attorney General might send it down through the Solicitor General. But it's made through the Attorney General office. You don't sue the government of Trinidad and Tobago and you just drop off your lawsuit by any division, by some little clerk in any ministry, some front desk worker. And even if you do that, the front desk worker knows where it must go. It has to go to the office of the Attorney General. So we are moving to that place so that we can streamline our responses to legal requests through that singular source. And I want to end by saying, though, that Tobago has so much potential, that as an island, we could do so much more. That as an island, I believe greatness is in store for us. This is essentially day 2 after being duly installed as members of the THA. And we are going to try our very best. We are going to work even harder than the first term. Don't think for a second that we believe that somehow we are invincible. Don't think for a second that this mandate that you have given to us, we take it to mean that we large, big, and in charge. At the end of the day, the people of Tobago are in charge. And at the end of the day, you are our employers. We are accountable to you. And it's with that philosophical underpinning that we seek to engage the next 4 years, that we seek to ensure that we provide for the people of Tobago adequate service, that we seek to provide for the people of Tobago transparency and fairness, a sense of fairness. And so I want to thank you again for your support. Tobago, you supported us crisis after crisis. You supported us. You prayed for us. You worked with us. and you showed up at the polls on Monday the 12th, and you ultimately gave us a vindicated mandate. And we are very much appreciative and we feel privileged by that. And we pledge to not waste that privilege. We pledge to not abuse that privilege. And we pledge to ensure that we work in a manner that ensures that the people of Tobago are justly rewarded for their support. I want to thank you very much. Thank you, members of the media. Thank you, Tobago. And thank you, those of you in the diaspora. Thank you, and God's richest blessings.